Hello everyone, welcome to this session. In this session we will cover the following topics. We will specifically be talking about samplers here. We'll talk about HTTP request, FTP request, JUnit sampler, TCP sampler, OS process sampler, JDBC sampler, test action, SOAP sampler, web services sampler, and debug sampler. There are many more samplers in the list, but we'll focus this session, we will focus on these samplers in this session. So let us get started. I'm going to launch the Jmeter in the bin folder. You'll see this Jmeter batch file. Double click it. The GUI may take a little time to open because it is based on Swing, so which is it takes some time to load. Okay, so as usual we start with this test plan and we add thread group, a novel thread group into this test plan. Let the settings be as it is, the default settings will work. Again right click on the thread group and over here you see this test element as sampler. There are many samplers as you can see in the list: access log sampler, bean shell, BSF, debug, FTP, HTTP, Java, JDBC, and so on. So it is not possible for me to cover everything in detail. For now, whatever I feel is important I'll cover, and when we are talking about database testing and when we talk about web services testing, corresponding samplers will take their time. But now I will just give you a brief on the important samplers. Of course, the most important is HTTP because we are going to work on web applications mostly, and this is the sampler which will be sending HTTP requests to the server. So let us start with this sampler. This is HTTP request. Now samplers are the test elements that send requests to a server and wait for corresponding responses. Okay, so they are the main entity over here which do the work in Jmeter. Basically, the work is to send some request to a server and get response, and samplers do the job. If I have multiple samplers, suppose I have multiple HTTP requests. This is one of the samplers I'm taking here in this session. If I have multiple requests here and I name them as 1, 2, and 3. So there are 3 HTTP requests which are part of this thread group. They will be executed sequentially. Okay. So now if I try to run this test, it will fail because I have not specified the server name. So this sample wouldn't know which server to contact. I'll first save the test because that is only when I can run the test after saving it successfully. So in Jmeter script, this is day 4. Now I'll also put a listener so that we are able to see the results. Without the listener, the test will run, but you'll not be able to see anything as to whether it was a successful run or not. So you see over here, all the 3 requests have been executed, but they are in red. The reason why they are in red is it says client protocol exception. URI does not specify a valid host name because I have not given any server name here, no IP here. So where should this request be sent to, which is unknown, and that is why the error. So let us have a closer look at this control panel, the control panel for this HTTP request. The first field here expects a name, which could be any descriptive name, say login, or you can have search and then log out. Okay, you can add comments to describe the step. The next is web server, server name by its name you can mention, or IP address. For example, if I want to get connected to google.com, I'll do this. If you have any application which listens on some specific port, put the port here. By default, it listens on 80. The web applications, the port number is 80. This is the timeout, connection timeout, and response timeout. For how many seconds should it wait for connection to open, and for how many seconds should it before it times out for response to be to receive the response from the server. The next is implementation. The three implementations of HTTP request: HTTP Client 4, 3.1, and Java. This is an older version. You may use HTTP Client 4 in all the cases. Java also is something that works fine, but this HTTP Client 3.1 may not be supported in near future. So it's always better that you stick to this implementation. Protocol, HTTP or HTTPS. Method, there's a huge list of methods here: get, post, head, put, options, trace, delete, and patch. Without going into much details, you just understand that get and post are two methods which are usually more often used when you are passing HTTP requests. Okay, the request can be passed using get method or post method. Get method, the URL carries the information that you want to pass along with the request, and post, it is not visible in the URL. You have to send it in some other format. You have to send it in the body. Okay, so here what you see in post body, this will show you the request request being sent using post method. Okay, path. Now, if you want, if you have some path to follow on a website, for example, if I show you this is wisdomtrainings.webex.com and then something beyond. So this is the server name, and whatever follows, starting with this slash, whatever follows is the path here. So since on google.com I do not want to navigate to any directory further, I will simply write this slash, nothing else, nothing will follow after it. There are two more options down there. You can add a file if you want to send it with a request also. Using this add, you can add the file path here, which can be part of your post request. So I'll delete this. If you are accessing your web application through a proxy server, which may be the case in organization that there is some proxy server set up, then you need to provide the proxy server name and port number, the username and password for the proxy server for authentication purpose. There's something down there that you see under optional tasks. There is this checkbox here: retrieve all embedded resources from HTML files. So you can use this HTTP request to download all embedded resources on a web page. Now these resources can be image files, can be the JavaScript, .css files, and so on. Okay, so if you want, as part of your request, to download all resources from this HTML file, you have to check this option. If you check this option, you basically are simulating your Jmeter, simulating this request to behave as it does on the browser, because browser, what it does, when you send a request to the server and server sends you a response, it is going to download all the embedded resources and show it to you in an HTML format. So similarly, when you have this checked, this will behave as browser. Okay. However, checking this option is not a must. It is not that you must always have it checked. You can have it unchecked and you can still continue testing your web application. Okay. When you check this option, when you check this retrieve all embedded resources from HTML files, you do see this option also enabled. When you uncheck it, this use concurrent pool size is disabled. Only when you have it checked, the concurrent pool size is enabled. And on enabling it, you can set the size of it. You can set it, by default it is 4, you can set it to 5 or 6 or whatever. Now what happens is, when you wanted to retrieve all the embedded sources from the HTML files, if you do not have any, if you do not use any concurrent pool size, what will happen? Sequentially, all the embedded resources will be downloaded one after another. Okay, which will take more time for this request to complete, because it has to download all the resources one after another. If you have this concurrent pool size checked and you have some good number set here, say 5, then for each thread, this is the thread group, and for each user, what it will do is it will create a pool size, a thread pool size, and under which each of these threads in this pool will work simultaneously, will work concurrently to download these embedded resources. So it will be the request completion will be fast. However, it will consume the resources of the machine. Okay, so you always have this figure set, because this will open up those many threads, and each thread is going to consume the memory, going to consume the resource. Now, how to use this HTTP Request Sampler? You can create it manually, and you can give the, if you have, you can give the details of web server if you have just one page to test. Okay, or when you know that you have some 3-4 pages and all of the web server and the paths are known to you, you can do that, provided all of them are in the requests are posted using method get. But if you have a big flow to measure, if you are making multiple requests to a web server in a flow, it may not be very easy for you to write down all these requests manually. Okay. In that case, you can use HTTP Proxy Server like we did in the last session. You can use this under Workbench. When you right click, you can add a non-test element, HTTP Proxy Server. You can make this as a proxy server and do the corresponding settings in your browser, and you can record the steps. By default, you will get some requests here on recording. For each step, you will get some samplers here, some HTTP requests here, and you can reorder or work with them. Maybe you can parameterize that. We'll learn it in the subsequent sessions, how we parameterize and everything. You can reorder and organize those steps to make a good script out of it. So that is one way of working with HTTP requests. So this kind of sampler, this HTTP request, will be used to test web-based applications. However, Jmeter also supports other kind of requests to be sent to server. We'll have a look at that now. The next type of request, you just right click, go to sampler, and we'll take a good look at FTP request. This is sending a request to an FTP server. Okay, so this sampler will let you send an FTP request. Now, what is an FTP? FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. There is a server over where there are many files. Using this FTP commands, using some FTP commands, you connect to the FTP server, you retrieve some of the files, or you upload some files on the server. Exactly the same behavior you can do with this FTP request. Okay, using this sampler, so using this FTP request sampler, you can upload a file onto the server, or you can retrieve a file from the server. Let us see how. So on the right side for FTP request control panel, you see the name. You can give the name. You can give comments. Now the server name and IP address. In the same manner like you had in HTTP request, you have server name and IP address. Similarly, for FTP server also, you will provide a name or IP address. I'll first show you a demonstration of a file server that I have. So once you have a file server, you need some client to connect to that file server. Okay, I have a client which is called FileZilla FTP client. Okay, I can use this FileZilla FTP client. I can give the host name. Okay, the username and the password. So I connect to this FTP server using this client on providing the information required like hostname, username and password. It is establishing the connection with the FTP server. On the left side you see the local site information. This is my current machine information. On the right side you will see remote site information. Okay. Now if I want to upload any file onto this FTP server, or if I want to retrieve any file from this FTP server, how do I do that? Using Jmeter. This is what we are going to see. So I have this FTP request and server name is ftp.safesoft.com. Port number, leave it blank. It will use the default port number used for FTP. I think it is 23. The port number for FTP, the default is 23. Remote file, what is the name of remote file that you want to fetch? Okay. Now, how will you decide what you want to fetch, whether you want to fetch from it or you want to upload onto the server? So this is using these two commands, get or put. Get is retrieve, RETR, and put is storing the file there. So I want to retrieve a file. Okay, so I'll have to give the path of or the name of the file name. Now for example, I have a folder there called Wisdom Trainings. It is Wisdom Trainings, under which I have the file called index.html. I want to retrieve this file. That is why I select this radio button get. And what is the local file? So I want to put this file on my C drive, and I would call this file as ftpget.html. Okay, so I'm connecting to the server. This is the server name. This is the remote file name, and this is the local file name. So after retrieving, the file will be found at this location by this name. Now this is the login configuration. So I will give the login configuration. Okay. As usual, I have to have this view results tree to see if the test passed or failed. Okay, I have got two requests. One is HTTP request, the earlier one, and I have another request, FTP request to retrieve a file, and I would see the results in this view results tree. Let me clear off all the data and run this test. So login successful. It is still running. If you see on the right side, one user is running, and you see this green square here, which signifies that the test is in running state. FTP takes some time because you have to connect to the server, you have to go to that directory, retrieve the file. Usually it takes time, so that is probably the reason why it is still running because it's trying to establish the connection. Now it is done. You see a green tick against this FTP request. Let us see the request. The request was this, and the response, nothing shows up. So how do I check whether this passed or failed other than what it shows from this green tick? I have to see the file, right? So I go to command prompt. I'm sorry. Okay. So here I should get a file ftpget.html. Okay. I'll just mark it here. Here is the file. I will show you graphically also. So this FTP get is the file that you see here. In this request, FTP request, you have a way of saving the file in response as well. If you check this option, you're going to save this file in response. Like in view tree, you see nothing in response data. If you want to see the file in response data, you can see that by checking this option. So I check this option, I clear off the data, and I'm going to run the test again. And I go back to view results tree. Again, the connection part will take some time. It is making connection to the FTP server and getting me the file. And this time I want the file to be loaded here itself. I want to see the content of file as part of response data. The test is still executing. Okay, it has executed. So I go here. So over here now you see in the current run you see something in the response data which is nothing but the file content. Okay. You can have as many requests. You can have as many FTP requests as you want. Suppose I have 2 or more requests like this, and all of these requests, all of these FTP requests are happening for the same server. They are contacting the same server. So what I can do, like in case of HTTP requests, if all your requests are talking to the same web server, we have HTTP Request Default, right? Similarly, you have this config element, HTTP Request Defaults. What you do in this is you give the server information. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to move it up, although it doesn't matter because it will execute in the sequence as it is defined. But, okay. So if you have multiple HTTP requests happening on the same web server, you need not give the information in each request separately. You can have them once defined in HTTP request defaults. Okay. So whatever follows at the same level, it will apply to all of these requests. Okay. So it is a good idea that we have them in some controller. So you go to logic controller and you put a simple controller. Under simple controller, you put this HTTP request default and then this HTTP request also as a child of it. So you have clubbed. Basically, controllers are used to organize the steps like we just did. Because if we had them all as child nodes of thread group, this HTTP default request default would also apply to FTP requests, which we don't want. That is why we have created a controller here. Again, I'm going to have one more simple controller and have all of these FTP requests in this simple controller. Okay. Now, when I want to have a request default, FTP request default, because all of these requests are pointing to same web server, I can add this FTP request default, which is under config element, added inside the simple controller. because that is when it will apply to all these child nodes. Now, instead of giving details individually to each of these requests, I will give it once here. Okay, so I'll give it here. I'll copy paste from there, ftp.savesoft.com. If you want to try out this example at your end and you do not have an FTP server, there are many testing FTP server or demo FTP servers available on internet for free. So you can download any of them and you can try out this test case yourself. So okay. So this is it. So this particular will remain the same, and over here I can remove the server name. Okay. Delete, and I am in each of this request I'm retrieving the same index file but in a different name. So I call it FTP get1, FTP get2, and FTP get3. Okay, and I will run the test now. So why this login is passing this time? Because I have added the server name here. When there was no server name, if you keep it blank, it will show you the error. Okay, this time it has failed. The reason being, response code, you can check out the reason or the status of your request from the sampler result. The response code is 000. There's no response data, although I had selected this. So what I can do is I can move this remote file name and local file name there as well. Just trying out with this option. Okay, this time the requests have passed. So in request default, you need to also provide remote file and local file name. However, let's see the other requests, what happened to them, and I can show you the files here. FTP1, 2 have been created. We're waiting for third request, that is why we don't see FTP3 here. Once again, if I fire it, okay, now I see 2, 3 here, FTP1, 2, 3. FTP get 1, 2, 3. All the 3 files have been retrieved. Similarly, you can change the request, you can put some file, you can check out the remote file location, give what local file you want to replace in place of this, and the same manner the test should run fine. Alright, the test is now complete. All 3 files have been retrieved successfully. and the files you do see in response data. You can check out the status of this FTP request over here, because when it was failing, it showed you 000. Now it shows you 200, which signifies success.